Hello and welcome to the IoT Leaders Podcast with me, your host, Nick Earl, CEO of SI. And this week, we're going to be talking about supply chain optimization. And although that as a subject may excite several people, it might not excite everybody. However, one thing I definitely think people will like about this is that this is a story of a small company that was acquired by a big company that actually has undergone 3 or 4 transformations to the point where a very large company, in this case, British Telecom, is actually now offering supply chain logistics, optimization, managed services to other companies for their engineering field sales force and their engineers. In a way that you wouldn't really expect. And it all started off with an idea of a small company called Elipod, and who then suddenly ran straight into the big company called Amazon. They realized they couldn't compete with, pivoted from B2C to B2B, and then started reinventing themselves and got acquired. And my guest this week is Jono Doyle, who is from Ireland. You'll be able to tell that straight away. And he was the first engineer into Elipod, straight out of university, and is now running on the engineering side still for what's now called BT Final Mile. So it's a really nice story. It's IoT enablement of supply chain optimization with a little glimpse into the future of where they might be going. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And with that, let me hand over to my interview with Jono Doyle from BT Final Mile. So Jono, welcome to the IoT Leaders Podcast.
Thanks, Nick. It's good to be here.
Okay, we're going to talk about supply chain and logistics and a pretty innovative IoT solution here. And it's an area that certainly from my perspective, I didn't really think too much about. It's not the most obvious area for IoT, but it actually is really innovative and has got a great ROI, essentially. It's a very clear business benefit. And it's in the area of supply chain and logistics. So you work now for BT, British Telecom Final Mile. We'll get into how you ended up in BT Final Mile, because that's an interesting story in itself. But first of all, as a way of context for the listeners, and indeed the viewers who watch it on the video option, could you just talk a little bit about BT Final Mile and what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what problem you solve?
Yeah, so I guess I need to describe what a BT Final Mile is and specifically what Final Mile is, and it's almost exactly what it is. It's the final mile of the logistics problem. So it's about getting the goods, the parcels, the packages, whatever it is, to the person who needs it, when and where they need it. So often we're quite good in logistics of getting stuff to somewhere and having lots of stuff there and people coming there and getting it. But, oftentimes that's really far away. It's a hub. They quite call them hubs. It's quite a popular term. And basically what that means is people need to go to these places, and obviously that creates a bottleneck and journeys for people that don't particularly need them. So Final Mile is about that final mile of delivery. So not just getting to the hub, but after that, how do you get it to the person? So that's what the final mile is. And quite simply, BT Final Mile is a solution to that problem. Or for me, it's the solution. It seems to be the best one as far as I'm concerned.
These people, I mean, it sounds a little bit like Amazon, but there's a specific group of people. It's not, as I understand it, it's not Mrs. Smith waiting in the house for a parcel and has to drive to a hub to pick up a parcel from Amazon, but it's not what we're talking about, is it?
No, it's not. I guess it's it's the B2P problem. So it's what the businesses face. So particularly engineering field services. So these people who go around installing your modems, your gas meters, going up telegraph poles. These people who actually, they also need stuff. They're not just ordering things off Amazon or eBay and getting delivered. They're ordering things normally off their own business or from somewhere, and they still need to get that stuff. But obviously it's quite important for them, where us at home, when we buy something online, we're somewhat okay with it being dropped next door. to the old lady down the end of the street. In a business setting, that's not really acceptable. That we can't say,
Yeah.
oh, it's with Mrs. Smith down the road.
Yeah,
I'll
you
go
get
pick up
Mrs.
in a couple
Smith's
of
got
days. Yeah,
your new smart gas meter,
yeah.
and she really didn't appreciate carrying it into a house because it's heavy. So we're talking about field service engineers, which is a pretty broad category of people, because I mean, you've already said it, BT don't do gas meters, so straight away you can see that what you're talking about is field service engineers in general. Yes, some of them might be BT putting a new router into your house or coming to do something to your house and getting the parts, which we'll go into. But this is an industry issue for anybody who has a field service team. It's a generic industry problem and opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, but for everyone, from the car breakdown guys to as I said, the guys who go up telegraph poles, people who look after fleet vehicles, all these sort of people require parts, and they can't have them delivered to their homes. They don't have the time to be going into the local post office with their little red card and saying, here, I've got a parcel, here's my ID, can I get it now? They don't have that time.
Do you have 36 gas meters in the back?
Yeah.
So it's a big issue. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry and problem, and it's all around optimizing that supply chain. So this is a broad industry solution, because a lot of companies, arguably anyone who sells things to businesses, have field maintenance, field support teams. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and those teams need spare parts. They need access to products. As you say, it's not the Amazon model. So the field service engineer doesn't get an Amazon delivery at Amazon Prime at 7 a.m. with all of the parts. So they presumably they have to go and collect them somehow. They have to get them, and they have to, I guess they're spending a lot of time doing that, which is what's at the heart of this. So maybe just to start off with, how does the industry in general solve the issue of getting products and parts to field service engineers?
Yeah, so the solutions that exist that aren't our IoT product, there's a couple of them out there. Some of them are quite strange, and I was quite shocked when I learned about them. The simple ones are sort of what we call PUDOs, pick up, drop off. So that's similar to what you would see as, if you were going to a Royal Mail office to pick up your parcel. It's more an industry standard, like they go into their warehouse and go to the desk at the warehouse and says, can I have my 10 gas meters, please? And the guy goes off, grabs 10 gas meters from the back and give it to him. So there's that solution, which obviously causes its own problems.
Well, especially, I would imagine, especially if 30 people all arrive at one time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. All these people are starting, all these engineers are starting at the same time. They're all starting at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. So they're all meeting there at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And that obviously means you've got 30 engineers, some poor person behind the desk have to collect all these
the
things.
Poor guy behind the desk with a bad back has got to get 30 cast iron gas meters.
Exactly. And these
engineers.
And these engineers are people, so they, their friends show up, they're going to stop and have a chat. They're not, going to rush away to work either. So they're the sort of problems with that. And also that, with these PUDO locations, these hubs aren't always in a convenient location for the engineers to get to. A lot of times they require driving through a town, to the other side of town, around to an industrial state. Maybe they thought doesn't really fit in with their day and their schedule. The other solutions then are literally what we've seen was having a room in a building, and they just go in. Their stuff has been dropped there the night before with everyone else's stuff. But if they've ordered, a brand new pack of spanners because theirs is old and rusty, and they're like, well, I need some new ones, they order them. But then their mate John shows up, 5 minutes before them, and he's like, oh, they're nice and shiny, I'll have them for myself, and takes them. It can result in things like people's tools going missing, going walkabouts, and then someone not getting their gas meter or smart meter installed because the tools have gone missing. And
I think we can all identify with that, because these supply chain issues are often covered up, shall we say, to the consumer. All the consumer knows is that you got a delivery slot of the engineers coming to fix your fridge or install whatever, and they'll be there, in the morning or the afternoon. You're lucky to get that level of granularity. And then you find that they don't show, and it's very frustrating. And of course, one of the reasons they don't show is because, and I guess a pretty common reason actually, is because the parts were either, the spanners, as you say, were either chosen by the guy who got through the door first, or the parts were just not there, or the supply chain, the delays in the supply chain mean that they just couldn't get to job number 7. They only got 6 done that day, and therefore they didn't show up. So this is an enormous problem, the distribution of physical goods for supply chain engineers. So that's what we're talking about.
It is,
and no one's really cracked it. And none of the consumer delivery companies are in this business. They're into B2C. You're solving a B2B problem. So let's start off by now going back in time, because you actually were part of the company that BT acquired to solve this problem, which I believe was called Pelipod. So first of all, let's talk about Jono. So give me the brief history of Jono, because I believe you went from university to Pelipod, which was the company that was started with an idea to solve this. Is that right?
That's exactly what happened. I graduated in product design in Ireland, and pretty much when I finished that, it was during the sort of the end of the crash, the economic crash, which I feel like we've had many now.
Who knows?
And for
financial
me, really,
one, are you the financial crash? Are you talking about the 2008?
The financial 2008 crash. It was.
Some of us are a little bit older to remember a couple before that, but we'll move on.
For me, my options were a little bit limited in Ireland at the time. So I started looking at jobs abroad. I was young, so I saw this job advertised. I think it was on one of the websites for jobs that are around. Applied for it, and got a call off Mark, who was one of the founding members of Pelipod, saying to come over to London for an interview. Chuffed it myself. I booked my flights, arranged a time, all sorted, to meet them probably around midday or afternoon in Heathrow for an interview. But it gets to, I think, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's some ridiculous earlier, and I get a call. This was back when good customer service existed for airlines. A call from the airline saying my flight's been cancelled. And basically they gave me the option to get on an earlier flight at like 3 a.m. or something in the morning. So I have to go wake up my dad, give him a good L shake and say, here, you need to drop me to the airport now.
This story about solving global supply chain problems all comes down to you shaking your dad awake at 3 a.m. To get you to go for the first flight out of Dublin or wherever.
Yeah, out of Dublin into Heathrow. And I'm from there. Then obviously a long wait in the airport then to meet the guys. Doing my interview prep.
You got the job.
I got the job. Yeah, I didn't scare them off. I had a thicker Irish accent then than I do now, so it didn't scare them off.
I wasn't going to mention anything. All right. So listen, you were the first engineer on board. Is that right?
The rest of the people weren't really engineers. They were, Carl, whose idea it was, who I guess he knew systems. He was very IT sort of based guy, and the rest were a similar background or just management backgrounds. So I was the first sort of engineer, but I was a product designer. I wasn't really an engineer.
So you found yourself with well, first of all, you're owing your dad a favor because you shook him awake at that time of the morning. But you got the job, and you found yourself in a startup called Pelipod, which was not exactly directly related to the degree that you did, but then a lot of us are in a similar sort of situation. And what was Pelipod's? So this is just around the time of the crash, so we can date it to like 2008, 2009, or something like that, I
Yeah,
guess.
well, it was the end of the crash, so it was in the early teens. There
Oh,
was
okay,
no,
all right.
yeah, so
Well.
yeah.
And what was Pelipod's idea? What was the big idea?
Well, then it was a B2C solution. That was what we thought it was going to be, and where our focus was. So it was to create still a final mile solution, but maybe something more similar to what your listeners will be will know, like your Amazon lockers and stuff like this.
Like
But this was
Amazon
something that
Lockers.
sits
Yeah,
outside your front door,
yeah.
um, and essentially someone comes along with your parcel. It was very specifically, you could generate codes. You go onto our website, you click, I want to generate a code for my locker. You put that into your actual address line.
Yeah.
So then when an engineer, well, sorry, not an engineer, it'll be your delivery man, your Amazon man comes around, he'll see Pelipod 1, 2, 3, 4, types it into this locker box thing outside your door, opens it up, drops the parcel and closes it. It takes a picture of it, of what's in there, and it sends you a text message saying your new parcel's been delivered from Amazon, and it's been opened and closed at this time. And then if someone comes along, your son comes along, opens up the box with his code, because he'll have a unique code if you have chosen to give him one, and decides he likes your parcel and takes it, it will say, all right, it has been opened by, in my case, Jono. He's taken your new phone for himself and closed it, and you'll know that because obviously you go back home and it's been taken. You can see who's opened it last, and it was your son. So yeah,
it's interesting, John, how that market has now evolved, because with the benefit of hindsight, we can look back and say the B2C market was just taken by two innovations by Amazon, shameless plug, both of which powered by SI connectivity on a global basis. But one is the Amazon lockers, which aren't outside your front door, but are sort of in the not far away, but the bright yellow banks of lockers. Same concept, but it's actually somewhere you go to drop and drop off, pick up or drop off. And secondly is it's just starting in the US now, but is key for business, where people can actually have access to your, if you give them a door or a gate or a warehouse door or whatever, the Amazon Prime driver can actually get access without you going there to open it when the van turns up. So Amazon are just completely automating that. So at some point there must have been a pivot. So you got acquired by BT? What year did you get acquired?
Trying to think now. I think it was 2017, but I think the conversation had started in about 2016.
Yeah,
around that time.
So what you pivoted to B2B, the whole field service engineer. Was that as a result of the BT acquisition, or were you pivoting anyway?
I think we were pivoting anyway. We'd certainly realized how difficult it was in the B2C market. There was no way we were ever going to be able to contend with the big players like Amazon really in that space. You can't. It's very difficult to go into that and say, "Hey, I'm taking these guys on." It's So it required some level of change. And we discovered through conversations with people going to your shows and trying to sell it that the same problem exists for businesses for the B2B world, with field, and particularly the field service engineers. And I know BT at the time had just started looking at a solution. They were trying to find the solution to their supply chain problems.
They had the problem. They've got a huge field engineering force. So they were a big strategic a company with their own problem. They were looking for a solution anyway, right?
Yeah, they were looking for a solution anyway, and other large companies like EDF use their supply chain as well. So it was a massive problem and a massive cost to their business. So it was just right timing, really.
Which is true for a lot of companies are in a completely different business to the one they started off in originally. They often don't tell the story, but something happened. Either winning a customer or a competitor came in and just says, oh, we're screwed here. But actually, you know what, if we sort of turn it 90 degrees to the left, paint it red instead of green, actually we solve a different problem. And that's a defendable hill, because people aren't looking in that direction, which is exactly what you did. So all right, so we got the so what now? BT Final Mile been in there since, I guess, 4 or 5 years. And now it's a pretty well-established solution out there. You've got quite a few customers. So how many customers have you got and how does it work?
To be honest, I have no idea how many customers we got. There seems to be a new email I get every week saying.
Well, I actually knew the answer to that one. I knew the answer because
So I
I did a bit of research, and yes, I do research of the podcast guests. I believe I'm right in saying that you have about 1,900, so let's call it 2,000. Oh no, they were sites, weren't
yeah,
they?
so there are a lot of sites BT on, a lot. A bit of a fun. Well, I like to think about it. If you ever hear about, when you're in a big city and they say you're never 4 feet away from a rat. Well, you're never more than 15 minutes away from a BT site.
Yeah, I'm just glad you're an engineer, not in marketing, John. But
So
I think we've got your general drift.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sites. So we're on probably over 1,900 sites now, and we've got about, I'd say, just over 5,000 Elipod device, lockers specifically on those sites.
Okay, so 5,000. All right.
Yeah.
We'll leave the rodents behind. So we got 5,000, and they're being used by multiple companies. So how does it work?
Yeah, so it's a really, this is the beauty of the IoT solutions. It's quite simple, certainly for, I guess, for the engineers and for the customers to use. Essentially, there's two sort of ways they can do it. They can either have PIN code for our engineer, and that's their locker that they go to every day, or they can have a one-time use code that works more towards, I guess, so it's the parcels and the actual goods going into the locker. So if we talk the PIN code solution, it's one of probably the most common ones that they like to use. Is a locker gets assigned to an engineer or a group of engineers. 2 or 3 of them might share a locker. If the customer wants to save money that way, they can do it that way. And deliveries get put in there by us. We do the deliveries as well, as part of the service we offer. And then
I hit pause there. Sorry, I always like, because I always probe on the business model.
Yeah.
You just said something, you're about to move on, because I think it's going to come back to where you likely to or could go in the future.
Yeah.
You not only are installing the lockers and offering the service, but as a revenue stream for BT, but you are actually offering the logistics. You're becoming a logistics company in itself. You just said that you're actually offering to put your customer, the company's products into your lockers.
Yeah, we do pick up from their locations and drop it to the Elipod lockers. We offer that service for them, and the returns as well. We go there and pick up whatever.
It's becoming a one-stop shop. It was a locker. It's now a logistics company.
Yeah, it is, and
Right.
it makes it a lot easier for the customer. They don't have to shop around and do different people for all different parts of their supply chain. They can just come to us, and we'll solve the problem for them. So yeah, where was I? Well, the PIN codes.
Yeah, you were saying the 2 ways.
That's all right. That's right.
The most common is the PIN code.
The PIN code solution, and that's really like, so if you were an individual engineer, you'd have a PIN code, and that's your locker, and you can always access that locker with that PIN code, until someone says, well, you're not having access to that locker anymore. So essentially what happens is we drop the goods off, and they'll say, pick up your goods whenever you want, and they'll just go to the locker. They know their PIN code. It'd be, on a piece of paper someone's given them at some point, or in an email from their line manager. They'll access the locker every morning, every second morning, whenever they need to pick up their goods and drop them off. And we'll have an agreement where we'll go out and we'll empty the locker every Friday or something like that, just so that they know that's the day their returns gets picked up. And that solution is quite good where they want to have engineers sharing lockers, and just have an engineer who just has to remember his one PIN code. That's it. It makes it quite simple for them. The other option is, the option I like, to be honest, is what we call one-time use codes. And essentially that's more assigned to the parcel that goes in there. Because what happens is you get the delivery driver coming out, and he has a unique code. He opens the locker, he drops the box in and closes it, and it says that parcel has been dropped off. We know that because the guys used that code. And that can trigger an email, a text, phone call, whatever it is, out to the engineer that says your parcel, your smart meter has been dropped off into this locker at this location. Here's your unique code. Go pick it up. Therefore, when they go and they use now their unique code that is one-time use and open and close it, it will say engineer A has picked up his smart meter at this time. So that, that individual smart meter is now tracked in that, within that window.
Okay, so you've now gone down to tracking of an item, and all of this is, I mean, it's implicit, but we should probably make it explicit. It's using cellular, obviously.
Yep.
You guys need 100% coverage, because it's no good if you've got 90% coverage if 10% of the lockers can't be opened. So you need a SIM which gives you the and a capability which gives you the maximum connectivity, because you want to be able to put these lockers, well, banks of lockers actually, in any location. It's very similar to what Amazon asked for, actually, which is presumably one of the reasons why you chose SI for the solution.
It is, and yeah, these lockers do end up in the strangest locations. I tell you that. We have ones up, beside basically what's a cow shed up on a hill on the side of Scotland, and they work, and they work perfectly, and engineers do go up and use them, and we've got ones in the cities, and some that we are a bit surprised that they do work, because they're under, often telephone exchanges, but they still manage to work,
So five yards from a rat or 5 yards from a cow is what you basically said.
Yeah. They work no matter what livestock's around. Yes.
Yeah. But the serious point is that mobile network operators, as regular listeners to this podcast know, we never fail to mention it, but we all know that if you put a proprietary SIM in the device, it works great until it doesn't, and you can't swap, or if you're a locker, you can't move 5 yards to the left to get a signal. So you've got to have basically 100% for every location.
Yeah. Yes.
Our your business case and your brand goes to hell, because people can't either open them or they can't retrieve their parcels.
Yeah, it'll be, we wouldn't be able to operate if we went to our customers and said, you'll be able to open at half the time. That just doesn't work. The engineers, the businesses need to know that they can go and get into their locker when they need to get into their locker. Because at the end of the day, there's a business cost to someone not, being able to deliver their service, and there's a human cost to someone not getting their job done. There's engineers who'll be out driving later than they should when they should be at home doing, homework with their kid. There's, a real cost.
Brand, and that's one of the things that we found, is that when people are looking at the use case for IoT, it's obviously to justify a project, to get the budget allocated, it's often very difficult for people, because this concept of, well, how on earth do I get a business outcome return on an IoT project? And one of the most common ways of doing it is saying, well, if what does every 1% of non-connectivity do to your business? It's cost, time, brand, customer satisfaction, all those, and that's actually where the ROI is. From our perspective, because we offer the highest percentage. But then what people then start doing, and that's where we're going to go now, is they implement one way initially. Now, in your case, you did B2C, and then you pivoted to B2B, you got acquired. Then now you're scaling B2B. You've gone to different customers, not just BT, but EDF, so the power distribution company, other types of customers. So you're becoming a logistics, a sort of a B2B version of Amazon lockers, actually. But then now you're also becoming a logistics company to actually put stuff in lockers and take it out again. And then you started going into a very interesting area, which is you're now starting to get more granularity of data around individual items that are within lockers.
Yep.
And that raises a very interesting possibility, which I'd like to explore a little bit, which is are you actually a physical product company anymore, or are you becoming an information company? In other words, what do you think the potential is here to actually start doing more than just have information about the customers' products when they're in one location? I mean, these products come out of the lockers and then they move. And so there's tracking possibilities and various things. So what are your thoughts around that area?
Yeah, so yeah, it is logistics, and it's all about things moving, not sitting there in lockers, and obviously it becomes quite important to know where everything's moving at once. So right now we're in very much snapshot mode, as a whole industry. We know it's in a hub, it's in a van, it's
Yeah,
dropped off, and there's
there's
all this
few
space in
data points, but a lot of
yeah,
gaps in between.
there's all this space in between that,
Yeah,
there's absolutely no visibility of what's going on. If something happened to the parcel, it's kind of like, well, it was in the van, but well, where was the van? Was it parked? Okay, we can tell that much. Was the door open? Was it on the shelf it was supposed to be on? Did he, take it off the shelf at any point and put it somewhere he wasn't supposed to?
yeah,
There's all these, and you can say that for pretty much everything from ships to planes to in the warehouses.
yeah,
You can, because and if you think about the sheer amount of goods moving around all this time, and basically all these assets moving around, you want to be able to sort of see it in one go. That's where every single thing is, so where anything goes missing, what happens, because it's about what goes wrong, really, isn't it? It's about, because when things do go wrong, when things do go missing, that's the points that you don't actually see where the product
yeah,
is. It doesn't go missing when he's handing it to the person at the end of the line.
yeah,
That's not where it goes missing. It goes missing, in the vans, when it's in transit, on the ships, on the planes, in the warehouses. That's where it goes missing, where you sort of presume, oh, it's been stamped in, but it's never been stamped out. So
yeah.
it's all about that sort of asset tracking. You can sort of see and sort of grow that further on. So if you could always see where something was for everything, you can start to redo and rethink how you think supply chain and logistics work, because you can sort of almost get rid of warehouses and get rid of
That's right.
all
Yeah.
these stock locations and holding stock, and just have it always dynamically moving. And if you can
Well,
see
you're
where
right.
everything is, you can redirect it. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, you're right. In fact, a lot of the warehouses, I in a previous life dealt with Amazon before they introduced Amazon Prime and Amazon Lockers. Just happened to know about them, and they had these big distribution centers, and then they had smaller ones outside cities, and then they have even smaller ones. And now eventually they pushed it right the way, final mile, right the way to the consumer, basically. But they've optimized the supply chain, and a lot of these buffering stocks, which can be 30% of the total products in the supply chain, a lot of the buffering was because of the inefficiencies in the supply chain. So if you can actually get better visibility, almost real-time, ultimately real-time visibility by
Yeah.
product, then actually you not only get data and visibility, but you actually save huge amounts of money, because you don't need the buffering stocks and the warehouses, and you actually get huge savings because you've got supply chain visibility. So it's an enormous prize. How are you going to? Can you talk about how you might be able to do that?
Not really.
I didn't think you could.
Yeah, well, I can obviously imagine how that would work. It would go on to, it's assets, packages, totes and stuff will have to become smart to do that.
Yeah.
These individual units that you are transporting, because right now what they are just, labels with barcodes on them, and it requires someone to scan them and someone to scan them at the other end. That that doesn't work for asset tracking. That's just the snapshots. What we need is, I suppose, those totes or packages or even items themselves to become the IoT products.
They've and I know there's competitive for competitive reasons. Even if you are planning on going in this direction, you're not going to talk on my podcast about how. It's not that you don't know it; it's just that you don't want to talk about it, and I get that. But yeah, absolutely. The products themselves have to have a smart label of some sort on them, with some form of power. And because what you really want is the products to actually say, I'm here, because a lot of people have tried to solve it just putting a lot of sensors and scanners all around the place, but you've still got all these gaps. And as you said, when they're on a ship or when they're on a plane, it's obviously a little difficult since there isn't any cellular signal. But with 5G and what's going to happen on narrowband, the ability and mesh networks, the ability to actually track millions, if not billions of things almost all the time, not quite all the time, but almost all the time, is going to revolutionize supply chain. When you start getting, so let's skip over what solution you might be implementing, but when you, if and when you get this ability to do that, it seems to me that you're morphing again as a company into another type of company. You're becoming a company who has better information about where a customer's products are than the customer themselves have information. So therefore you can sell something new called information about where your products are. And that's a pretty exciting prospect for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You become a sort of almost like a management consultant to some extent, going in and telling them how to do things, because you end up knowing more about their business than maybe they do, or at least an aspect of it, which will be their supply chain, and coming in and saying, well, if you start doing things differently, you can run your business this way and become more efficient.
Yeah, you can. I can see from the way that you're running it compared to the industry norms for other customers in your vertical.
Yeah,
you are efficient here, but not efficient here. Therefore, this is the opportunity for you, and we can help you.
Yeah, I suppose that last line is the important one, isn't it?
Yeah,
how
we can help you normally means for a price. But yeah, you're either becoming like a management consultant, or you're partnering with management consultants or global system integrators, but because you have the data, and we have several customers who are doing that. I've talked about them on the podcast before. So, Brambles, who own the CHEP brand, which are the pallets and containers and pallets, but they have got tens of millions of devices, which the blue pallets that you see in Costco have a battery-powered device molded inside the plastic.
Yeah.
The issue there is the battery life management, but they know where the products are within Costco, if you like. Another customer of ours is called, in the US customer again, called Link Labs, and Link Labs are doing this tracking at a more granular level in the sense of these plastic containers like Ocado, they drop your shopping off.
Yeah, trays.
Yeah, and they're the ones that go down the conveyor belts in the factory. So it's the same, and then it gets loaded into a van, and then it gets dropped off to the customer. So it's the same product. So if you put a tracker on that, you are getting continuous visibility. The issue is that people tend to keep those plastic crates because they're quite useful, kids' toys or just quite useful. So just tracking those, it's not so much tracking the devices, it's actually tracking the container. So there are a lot of companies trying to do this. I think one of the advantages that you've got is that you've got the customers more directly than other companies. You've already got the field service force using your lockers anyway for their. You're already embedded in their job, in their business process. So there's some natural extensions for you just to go a little bit wider, a little bit sideways, and solve a few more of those issues. So it's going to be very interesting to watch your progress.
Yeah, it's small, step by step. Yeah, we'll do this next and this to get to this final picture where we are the knowing-all being of their supply chain. Really, yes. Yeah.
There's a phrase in the US is not your. This is not your grandfather's Oldsmobile, which perhaps might not mean too much for people outside the US, but Oldsmobile was seen as being a really old-fashioned car, and suddenly it was marketed as, wow, what happened, transformation. And I only mention that because if you think about the story we just told, and then you have to say, this is BT that we're talking about. I mean, you wouldn't associate BT, fixed line telecom company, wouldn't naturally associate them with supply chain, logistics, managed services around product information, supply chain optimization. So it's a very innovative story. It's a great story of acquiring a startup and then turning it into a service, and then using that service to actually create a whole new set of capabilities away from the core business of the parent company.
Yep. Yeah.
It
We're
doesn't
not a telecoms provider, that's not
yeah,
what
it
we
doesn't
do.
rely on the broadband to the customer's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've made that decision that we don't use Wi-Fi. We could have obviously said quite early on in Elipod, when it was a box outside someone's house, oh, we'll make it with Wi-Fi, but we didn't. Even in BT, we kept that.
Yeah.
Kept that off. We're not
Well,
using
we're
Wi-Fi.
certainly as SI glad you made that decision, by the way.
Oh, well, I think it works better, doesn't it?
But it does work better
Yeah.
because you can't really, you know what happens if you, it's like the, the Bosch mowers. They always say, people say, why does the Bosch robotic mower not use Wi-Fi? Well, A, when it gets more than 25 foot away from your router, it grinds to a halt. But B, what happens when your Wi-Fi goes down or you change the password? You then lose your products. And so you just can't, it's great, it's free, but you can't rely on it. And so cellular is always the one that people use as the fallback option. Same for alarm panels. Listen, this is a really great story. It seems to me that it's something perhaps we could visit even again in the future, because you are gradually, as I said, expanding your capabilities across the supply chain piece by piece from the field sales force of the customers that you already have. And you've got within BT, you've got your own field service force, which is huge. But now with customers like EDF and others, you're adding new customers. So it'd be interesting to watch your progress in this area, particularly getting down to tracking individual items, which is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for the future of BT Final Mile. Given where I started in the company and what it was back then, and literally I started and we didn't even have an office. I think my first day was plugging the cables into the walls for the computers. To now and what we've got in the future. So I think in another 8 years, what will BT Final Mile look then? I thought, will there still be lockers on site? Probably not. It'll probably be a different sort of company altogether with the changes. Yeah,
I think we all will be. I got one final question for you before I let you go. I assume you go home still regularly back to Ireland, and so have you, since that day, have you ever had a phone call again from the airline where you had to race to the airport? In other words, have you had to shake your dad awake to get you to the airport, or are those days behind you?
They're well gone. I've definitely had flights cancelled on me, but not a phone call to tell me beforehand.
Yeah, as you said, there were days when the airline customer service was good.
Yeah.
That's another problem, which still searching for the IoT use case that solves that one. That's probably more of a financial problem than great. It's a really nice story, and both on a personal level and also from a business point of view, and the added bonus of rats and cows as well, which always makes it
yeah, a little bit of entertainment there.
Yeah. Okay. So Jono, thanks very much. Thanks for being my guest this week. And for our listeners, you've been listening to the IoT Leaders podcast with me, your host, Nick Earl, the CEO of SI. And I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to bringing you another episode shortly with another very interesting customer. In the meantime, have a great day. Thank you very much.